Isn't it really what films are supposed to do? I mean, they're supposed to take you someplace that you either can never go or don't want to, but want to experience some of it. I think films have to do that, you know, visually and emotionally, take you somewhere. I would say I was 25 or 26 before I really settled in and said, this is it, this is the decision, I'm going to work in film. I almost bailed on being a filmmaker. And the thing that kept me in the game was possibility.
Abyss and Terminator 2, and now with avatars that you just keep.
We had to be pretty ingenious to come up with new ways of doing things that had never been done before.
You can't keep a foot in one job, and it's a total and all-consuming thing.
What you do right now on the set.
So I approach it as an engineering problem.
It's like, do you have a sense while you're writing, like, there's no way to do this yet, but I'm going to have to invent it?
If you throw enough talent, artistic talent, and money at the problem, it's all doable.
It was the only place I could reconcile the need to tell stories.
Okay, let's do this. James Cameron is one of the most renowned directors in the world, and to this day, he continues to make amazing movies. From sci-fi to deep dives into the unknown, Cameron always pushes the limits of filmmaking, and this is what makes him so great. It's not just about the movies, but it's about the technology that he creates and the innovation that happens because his movies are so advanced. A lot of people don't know this, but in every single Cameron movie, there's just a feat of engineering and tech that happens, and most people just don't take the time to truly notice and appreciate this. So what are these innovations? How is a movie director behind them? And most importantly, how does he use technology to make his movies so good? And I think the only way, once again, to truly find the answer is by looking to him.
You have to do it because you're not going to survive in a constantly changing, transforming, metamorphosing world if you don't. The greater risk is to not be creative, to not be innovative.
So the thing that really sets James Cameron apart is how technologically advanced his movies are. When he makes movies, he's not just making art, but he's pushing the limits of what filmmaking actually is. Deep in his DNA, James Cameron is an innovator, and you even start to see signs of this as a child. There's a story of James' mother getting home one night, and she goes into the backyard to find James Cameron being pulled around by rope in an airplane that was built by all the neighborhood kids. So even when he was little, he just had this gift of leadership, but also of engineering. He even says, I was always fascinated by engineering. Maybe it was an attempt maybe to get my father's respect or interest, or maybe it was just a genetic love of technology, but I was always trying to build things. I want to go over some of the things that James Cameron has brought to the world of film, the impact that he has had on this world of filmmaking. And in order to do that, I think we really need to do a deep dive of his films.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator. Your future is in its hands.
So The Terminator was Cameron's major first success, and for a very good reason. You can sort of think of this movie as his rocket to fame. This movie, even when you rewatch it, to this day is still phenomenal. And what's even crazier is that this movie wasn't even supposed to be a hit. You see, Cameron was given $6.4 million to make this movie, and even back then, that wasn't a ton of money for a movie, especially a sci-fi movie, which just needs a ton of special effects and tons of set design. So right from the beginning of this movie, Cameron was set up for failure. There's even the story of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had some boots lying around and got asked by a reporter what those boots were for, and Arnold goes, oh, just some shit movie I'm doing, take a couple of weeks. But this movie for Cameron was special. It was a chance, an opportunity to actually make something good, even though he didn't have a lot of resources. This was his chance to make himself known as a great director. He used tactics like miniature models, low-budget special effects, and use of animatronics to make this happen. Combine this with, at least in my opinion, what is one of the best scripts ever written in the history of movies, and you get this absolute masterpiece.
Where is she?
Look, it may take a while. You want to wait? There's a bench over there.
I'll be back.
For a lot of the future scenes that show the war between the humans and the machines, he actually used miniature models of tanks and aircrafts to give the movie a sense of scale, even with the low budget. This made the film seem like a high budget film, even though it really wasn't. In the scene with Arnold in the bathroom, they literally made a lifelike model of Arnold's face out of silicone clay and plaster in order to get these effects.
And I myself would ask myself, is this me or is this the dummy? There was no way of telling the difference. And it was really weird.
He actually even just spent an extraordinary amount of time just on how the exoskeleton of the Terminator would look. They literally had 7 people work for 6 months just to make the Terminator puppet out of clay and steel ribbing, which was then attached to a radio mechanism that would allow them to control the movements. And they ended up using a lot of stop motion in the movie, which blended surprisingly well with the live action. All in all, with this first major hit, Cameron gets a chance to prove himself. He proves that you don't need a lot of resources to make something great. You don't need the newest camera or the newest technology or even more money to make the best product. You just have to use what you have to make something good. Cameron showed us that with a level of scrappiness and a bit of resourcefulness, you can compete at the same level as the big guys.
The 12 gauge autoloader.
There's a 15-day wait on the handguns, but the rifles you can take right now. You can't do that.
Wrong.
After The Terminator, Cameron decided to make the movie Aliens, which is a sequel to Ridley Scott's Alien. Don't get me started on the name, it's a whole thing. In this movie, Cameron now has a large budget, but he still continues to innovate.
Alien was a remarkable film, and it influenced a generation of filmmakers, especially those that like science fiction and fantasy, and I was one of them. And I was as much doing an homage to what Ridley had created as I was making my own movie, but I did set out to do both in a balance.
His biggest accomplishment during this film was probably the creation of the Alien Queen. This was a huge accomplishment in the world of animatronics. Cameron worked with a guy named Stan Winston on this costume, and they made sure to make it as lifelike as possible. It ended up being a 14-foot tall puppet that required 16 people to move it, and also to move all the different parts. This may seem kind of ridiculous and just like a hassle, but the lifelike movements and the realness of the Alien Queen was revolutionary at the time and really pushed the limits of filmmaking. It sort of added that extra level for the audience and really pushed the world of animatronics forward as well.
You can't leave me here alone!
You never backed away from anything in your life, now fight!
This movie is where things really begin to get interesting, and it's weird because not a lot of people have seen this movie. It kind of flopped in theaters, and it's kind of sad because there is so much that went into the production of this film. For starters, pretty much the entirety of this movie had to be shot underwater, and they didn't plan on shooting the film in the ocean because all sorts of stuff could go wrong. There could be thunderstorms, the currents could wipe out some of the sets, large waves, all sorts of problems. But Cameron was determined to make this film underwater.
Everything that everybody went through filming underwater and the many, many problems you had. Was it necessary to go to all that?
Well, I think so. I think, obviously I thought so because that's the way I did it. So you're asking the wrong person. I believe that people will invest in a film more if they feel the sense of reality coming out of the movie at them.
So he goes around and he looks at a ton of different places that they could potentially make an underwater set. One of these places was an unfinished nuclear power plant in South Carolina. This power plant held containment vessels, which was in the shape of a very large cylinder. This plan would involve pouring thousands of yards of concrete, installing enormous filtration systems, and building a row of 20,000 heaters to control the temperature of the water. What this means is that this was not just going to be the largest underwater set that had ever been built, but it was going to be also a feat of engineering. And guess what? With Cameron's push, they did it. The hard part wasn't over though. Once the set was done, they actually had to shoot the film, And since a lot of the technology to shoot underwater hadn't been invented yet, they had to actually make the technology themselves. They made special suits so that they could communicate underwater, they built an underwater set, they even built screens so the director could review the footage while underwater. For the lighting, they had to light the entire underwater set without getting any reflections from the top, and the solution was actually very creative. What they did was they used these little black propylene beads to cover the surface of the water in order to not get any light reflection off it. I could honestly go on and on about this underwater set and how dangerous it was to film, and the one time James Cameron almost died while filming because he was running out of air. But I'm gonna leave all of that for the podcast, which you can check out right there. The next big thing about this movie was the CG. You see, Cameron was actually one of the first directors to adopt the multi-shot model for visual effects. What this is that instead of going to one company for all your visual effects, you actually sort of lease out contracts and go to multiple companies. This allowed for more competition between these visual effects companies, which really sped up the innovation process. Cameron also pushed the CG companies hard with this movie.
What? Oh wait, it's okay.
This scene with the water tentacles was actually one of the first ever realistic pieces of CG and set a new bar for where the industry would go. With this movie, Cameron was able to completely transform visual effects, but really only with this one clip. His next movie would completely revolutionize this brand new industry.
Then when it came on television, it was 10 times as big, the ratings and how many people saw it. And then when the video came out, it was like a mushrooming effect there. And I think that's what eventually led to the belief that we must do a second Terminator.
It's funny that every year that went by that we didn't make the sequel, the demand for the sequel got greater.
Exactly. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's entertaining, it's funny, it's action-packed, and back in the 90s, it was a landmark for visual effects. The biggest step forward for innovation for this movie was, of course, the T-1000. This was a human robot that could transform itself into liquid metal, and of course it would take a whole bunch of CGI to pull this off. Cameron hired a company called Industrial Light Magic to make the special effects for the T-1000 and spent $5 million on just these effects alone. Remember that the budget for Terminator 1 was $6.4 million, which is just mind-blowing, and now he's spending $5 million on just visual effects. These effects were transformative for the industry and set the bar for other movies that would happen in the future, like Jurassic Park. Throughout the filming of this movie, James Cameron also mixed the visual effects with practical effects, which made it look even more real. This movie was also his most expensive movie thus far, costing over $100 million to make. It of course made all its money back though, making $200 million domestically and $500 million worldwide. And once again, it is definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it.
Or since Kate gets up there, she takes one look at the sunset, she turns to me and screams, "Shoot!" So anyway, she's like, "Shoot!" We wound up getting 2 takes. One take was completely out of focus, and the other take was half out of focus. And the one that's half out of focus is in the movie.
The Titanic, another beautiful piece of art, was made by Cameron after rewatching a film made in 1958. It was called A Night to Remember. He was extremely interested in the story of the Titanic, and he wanted to make his own film about it. Originally, this film was supposed to cost $80 million, but it eventually ballooned all the way up to $200 million. But once again, this movie came with new innovation. You see, Cameron's obsession with the Titanic led him to the actual Titanic, like the shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean, sitting roughly 4,000 meters underwater. Not only did he want to go there, but he wanted to use actual real footage of the wreck. This meant developing brand new cameras that could withstand the water pressure all the way down there. It also meant taking a lot of dangerous trips on a submarine down there, one of them almost taking his life. Once he was back on set, he also ordered for better CGI water effects, which he then integrated with the real life shots. Also, a lot of these people falling from the boat actually are CGI. These were originally supposed to be stunt doubles, but Cameron cut them out after a guy broke his leg and a lady broke her rib. That's how you really know that James Cameron sets are tough. I think for me though, the main thing about this movie isn't really the CGI or the innovation in movies, but it's really capturing the essence of a historical event that actually happened. At one point, he was on an expedition down to the Titanic, and he starts crying and he says, quote, "The enormity of the tragedy, the loss of life, the horror of what it must have been like hit me." There's something about great directors and their obsession and a connection with history. And that connection really speaks to me. I think the one true innovation from this film was capturing that moment, that specific moment in history, and letting an audience marvel at what a horrific event this was that happened in the 1900s.
Stan Winston and I form a company called Digital Domain to create CG world, CG characters. Somewhere around 95, I wanted to write something that I thought of as a provocation, something that I would go get financing for, and as a filmmaker, I could encourage / kick everybody up the backside to generate all this new technology. So I wrote Avatar, which was a kitchen sink approach. It wasn't a smart approach.
By the time it came to shoot Avatar, Cameron once again wanted to make a movie that would revolutionize everything. And this movie truly shows innovation at its finest. This film is actually one of the first films to really use motion capture to the full extent that it was used. At this point, the most known motion capture performances were things like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies. And Cameron wanted to further the mocap tech, so he ended up making the Avatar.
I talked about I want to do facial performance capture, I want to do it with a camera, but they said, we can't get there from here. We can't get to what you want to create within a single movie cycle. We have to do other projects first and build the tool set and work our way up to it.
He pretty much made this entire movie using CGI, and he improved the industry a ton. The entire world was pretty much a virtual reality world, like a computer-generated world. And because of this, Cameron was able to sort of choose the frames that he wanted from the images that were given to him, presented to him by a computer. This made the movie just really stunning and beautiful. It was almost to the point where the world of Pandora actually felt real. And this is very big for the audience. This movie thematically was also ahead of its time, as Cameron displays the tension between technology and humans. Of course, Cameron is probably one of the last people who would ever want to limit technological innovation, but he also shows that he wants to do it in a safe way, where it won't harm nature or where it won't harm the environment. He wants to push innovation in a way where, well, let's just say that the Terminator won't happen.
A lot of good filmmakers out there, and a lot of good filmmakers that understand how to do CG and animation and world building and all that sort of thing. I think that what I would look for was somebody that is willing to be humble before the specific craft of how you make one of these films.
A bit more than a decade later, he also decides that he wants to take motion capture to another level, and he decides to make Avatar 2, which features motion capture underwater. By this point of the story, you can probably already tell that this guy's obsessed with water and blue and the ocean and stuff like that. For this movie, they once again had to design special suits that could include motion capture to shoot underwater. They used the new suits so that they could shoot scenes in underwater sets, and these scenes that were shot were actually enhanced using AI, which just helped the sequel become an even more immersive experience, which is the goal of a filmmaker.
You know, what's the best advice to someone who wants to be a director? And the answer I give is very simple. Be a director. Pick up a camera, shoot something, no matter how small, no matter how cheesy, no matter whether your friends and your sister star in it, put your name on it as director. Now you're a director. Everything after that, you're just negotiating your budget and your fee. So it's a state of mind, is really the point. Once you commit yourself to do it.
Overall, from all of Cameron's film, you see this recurring pattern. It's a pattern that involves taking the current technology and pushing it to its absolute limits, all in the aim of creating the most stunning, most beautiful, most action-packed, and just most revolutionary film of that time. And he's managed to accomplish this with almost all of his movies. What's even crazier is that at the end of the day, there's only one person at the top who is pushing all the innovation, and that is James Cameron. James Cameron is someone who pushes past the line of discomfort. And because of this, because he's a bit hard on people, he's able to bring the best out of them. He's able to bring true innovation from his crew, and he's able to bring his industry to a new level. And this single thing to push forward is how James Cameron has changed the world of movies forever. By doing this, he has shown the world that there is no limit to what movies could be in the future. There is no limit to the tech that we could use to make them. Technology will continue to improve, and it will be continually pushed by people like James Cameron. And thanks to that, directors are able to bring an even more immersive experience to the audience. Hello everyone, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I recently started a lecture series where I'll be diving into some of history's greatest people. We're going to be taking lessons from their lives and learning how to apply them in our own lives. And I just want to sort of do that like a podcast, just sort of more like a talk. So if you want to check out that series, I put one out on James Cameron, and you can go check that out right now. If not, thank you for watching this video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. See ya. See ya. All right, see ya.